the change that you wish to see in the world. So said Mahatma Gandhi, who lived between 1869 and 1948. Hi, I'm Charles. I'm a psychiatrist who has a special interest in diets that protect the heart, are good for your general health, and at the same time are good for the planet because they produce less greenhouse gases.
Hi, I'm Sinead. I have a Bachelor in Medical Science and I'm currently studying public health. And I am really interested in planetary health as well as diets that help the planet and your heart. So this week we're going to continue talking about the work of Dr. Dean Ornish and how he demonstrated that plant-based, low-fat diets can actually reverse heart disease that is already present, as well as preventing heart and cardiovascular disease from starting.
Yes, Sinead. So last week we spoke about how Dr. Ornish constructed tables to help calculate how much fat we can consume in a day to keep within the guideline of his very low-fat option, which is 10% or less of daily calories coming from fat. So those tables are actually in Dr. Ornish's book, and they're also in my book, and he gave me permission to reproduce them in my book. But to make things simple, and obviously because our listeners can't see the tables, we've given you some ballpark figures of the kind of amounts of fat that you can take in each day to keep within the guidelines. But before we talk more about those, perhaps we should remind everyone that if you're suffering from any heart or cardiovascular problem or any other medical condition, please consult with your doctor before embarking on the options or the exercise regimes that we're recommending.
Absolutely.
And also, please don't discontinue or reduce your medication because, they are serious disorders and they do require specialist input. However, if you find that the dietary options combined with exercise are helping you to lose weight or get your cholesterol or your blood pressure down, then please do discuss it with your doctor, and it may be possible for you to reduce some of your medications in consultation with them. And also then, if your problems are fairly mild, like just a somewhat raised cholesterol or slightly high blood pressure, or you're overweight, then what we are offering might be enough to remedy these problems without the need of any medication at all. And so finally, you can use these options and exercise recommendations to hopefully prevent these problems from ever occurring and improve your general health. And I definitely feel my general health has improved greatly since I've been using these. Yeah, and so if you need a reminder of the details of the 4 dietary options that we're recommending, we've discussed them in detail in the first 3 episodes of our podcast. So please have a listen to those first 3 episodes.
Absolutely, Charles. And also, I would like to give a reminder to everyone that these dietary options that we're recommending, as well as helping your heart and general health, are great for the planet. This is because eating mainly plant-based diets causes the production of much less greenhouse gases. The production of 1 gram, a single gram of beef protein, can cause the emissions of 250 times the amount of greenhouse gases than the production of 1 gram of protein from legumes, for example, soya. Also, the fact that 20% of global greenhouse gases are caused by animal agriculture. So if we eat less meat or go vegetarian, it's a win-win situation because it's good for your heart and your health and also good for the planet.
So in the last episode, we were talking about how to keep your consumption of fats and oils down to minimum levels, and particularly keeping our consumption of saturated fats to a minimum. So we're saying that for people of average height and average build and who have moderate or active exercise levels, the ballpark figures that we're aiming for are as follows. So first of all, it's broken down between men and women. For an average height and average framed man who wishes to reduce their weight to between 150 and 165 pounds, the approximate figure of total fat consumption would be about 25 to 28 grams daily, and that's to stay within the most strict 10% figure, 10% of daily calories coming from fat. And the corresponding figure for saturated fat is a daily limit of 8 to 9 grams per day.
And then the equivalent figure for the average height and framed women who wish to aim for a target weight of 130 to 150 pounds, the total daily fat consumption should be between 20 to 25 grams, and the total saturated fat should be not more than about 7 to 8 grams. But the good news is that these levels apply only to the strictest of our dietary options, which is the 10% vegan option, which has the potential to reduce or even reverse heart disease. If you go for one of the 3 preventative options, so we have the flexitarian, lacto-vegetarian, or 20% vegan options, you can double all the above figures to give your daily consumption.
Yeah, that's right, and it's a lot more manageable to do that, Sinead. And but the first option, the 10% option, is the one that probably gives the strongest results, but it's also a little bit tough to stick to. So many people might find the 20% option easier to cope with. Then there's the question of how do you know how much actual fat you're taking in each day, and there's we mentioned this last week too. There are 2 ways that you can do that. First is by looking at the packaging of the food that you're eating, and on the packaging of most food, there is the amount of fat, saturated fat, contained within it as 100 grams of food.
Yeah.
And the second way to check how much fat you're eating, now things don't always come in packages, like your potatoes or your cauliflower may not. So there are tables in the back of Dr. Ornish's book and also in my book, which give a list of nearly all the foods in alphabetical order and the amount of fat and saturated fat in each measure of food. So, for example, if you go to B in the index of that list, a typical baked potato, to P, not B, typical baked potato with nothing added has 0.2 grams of fat and 0.0 grams of saturated fat. So to give you an illustration of how to try and keep within the guidelines, I want to tell you a bit about my personal experience following my heart episode. So, as I said, I read Dr. Ornish's book, and the diet he recommends is virtually the same as the 10% vegan diet that we're recommending. And so from the tables, I had an ideal weight that I wanted to get to of 160 pounds. And I looked up, and so I had a total limit from the tables of total fat of 28 grams per day and saturated fat not more than 9 grams per day, as to keep with the 10% option.
Okay, yeah.
So just a reminder what saturated fat is. Saturated fat research has shown it's particularly harmful to the heart, and saturated fat is found in things like red meat, processed meat, full-fat dairy, and cheese and eggs.
And like your oils as well, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, so fats and oils are the same thing, really. So there are some oils that are very heavy in saturated fat. For example, coconut oil or palm oil isn't great. So you need to just stick, if you're using oils, try and stick with the ones that have the lowest amounts of saturated fat.
Yeah.
The one I always use and recommend for cooking is rapeseed oil, or in America it's called canola oil.
Okay.
It has the much lower level of saturated fat than olive oil, which some people use. Don't get me started on the Mediterranean diet again. But the saturated fat has been shown to increase the process of atherosclerosis in your arteries. So I found it's hard to be monitoring the amounts of both total fat and saturated fat. So I found it easier to mainly monitor the total level of fat that I was taking in, but at the same time keep an eye on the saturated fat level.
Okay.
Which, as we said, should normally be 1/3 or less of the total fat value. Yeah. So most foods will have both total fat and saturated fat, but if the food has more than 1/3 of saturated fat, it should start sounding alarm bells and maybe should be avoided. So the way I actually went about it, I started keeping a diary where every day I listed everything I ate and made a tally of the amount of fat in each of them. Okay. So in the diary, I put things in an abbreviated form. So a slice of whole grain brown bread became SLBR times 1, 0.6 grams, because it contains 0.6 grams of fat. Okay. So every day I had daily columns of my total fat consumption, and I was keeping, as I said, an eye on the saturated fat to make sure that was low too. So I decided to go on this, as I was researching diets, I decided to start on Dr. Ornish's diet because it sounded so promising.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I went on his reversal diet, and I stuck with it. Now, it wasn't easy. It was a big change from the regular high-fat, careless diet that I'd been eating before. But I started on it, and I did, although it was initially a challenge, I started more then to appreciate the beautiful, subtle tastes of vegetarian whole grain food. And you do find that your taste buds and your palate does exist to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you just feel better when you're eating better as well. Like, it's such an easy way to like boost your mood almost. Yeah. Did you find that when you change your diet?
Yeah, and you don't feel so heavy. The food you're eating is lighter, and you wouldn't feel kind of tired after eating a meal like that. Yeah. So you can concentrate better in the afternoon after eating that kind of lunch. Yeah. So you don't need to carry on calculating your fat intake indefinitely, but I would recommend, and Dr. Ornish also recommends, about 2 months of doing a calculation. And after that time, you'll get to know how much you can eat and the kind of foods you can eat to keep within the recommended guidelines.
I know there's some apps as well that let you track like what the food you're eating.
Yeah, that's it. I didn't use them, but I'm sure that can be helpful too. Yeah. And the other thing is, even though you stop keeping a tally of your daily fat, you do need to still be aware of how much fat the various foods you're taking in, especially ones that unfamiliar are. So you need to keep looking at the labels of the food that you're buying. And you can continue monitoring your intake long term, but it takes it takes a bit of effort to keep that daily diary.
I think once you do it for 2 months, you have a better idea.
Yeah.
Do you have a better general idea of what type of food you're eating, the levels of fat in each food?
Yeah.
So you can start making wiser choices then.
Yeah, you get to know them by heart. And I searched around as well for vegan spreads because I used to like butter, and so I wanted a good option, alternative to that. And the one that I found, as we've mentioned before, is Floralite, which has very low levels of fat and saturated fat, and people have said to me, I don't like spreads. I prefer the taste of butter, but your taste buds do adjust to it. Yeah. And I prefer Floralite now, actually. And there was another way I found to do the calculation that was easy. I used the calculator on my mobile phone. And then each time I ate something, I had an ongoing kind of plus addition going on. So each time I just added the amount of fat. And I also kept a list in my wallet on a piece of paper of the common foods that I ate and how much fat was in them. So that was another way you can quickly refer without, having to look it up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's just such a quick and easy way to kind of figure out how much fat you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But the thing was, it wasn't easy. It was a big change, as I said, and I was struggling a bit. But what kept me going was, after 3 weeks, I decided to have my cholesterol checked.
Okay.
And when the blood results came back, when I was eating on a healthy diet, my blood cholesterol had gone up to 5.9 in millimoles, which was in the US system 229.7 milligrams per deciliter. And when the results came back, I was astounded because I'd got the lowest cholesterol I ever had, it had gone down to 4.43 millimoles, or 171 milligrams per deciliter.
Yeah.
So that really made me feel what I was doing was worthwhile, and it gave me
it shows that the
Yeah.
effort you made was worth it.
yeah,
You know?
and that gave me the incentive to continue.
Fantastic. So after that good news story, it's time for a little break. So why don't you pop the kettle on and have maybe a little snack, maybe some whole grain bread and bananas if you'd like, or any other low fat snack that you'd like. We'll see you in a bit.
If you find the topics that we've been talking about interesting, you'll find a lot more details about them in my book called Save Your Heart, Lose Weight and Help Save the Planet, which is available on Amazon. So we were talking about the Dr. Ornish's reversal diet and the 10% limit of fats as a percentage of calorie production. But that's really particularly if you have a heart problem already or heart disease. But Dr. Ornish in his book also described that you can take slightly higher levels of fat if you're just going for prevention, as we said, rather than reversal of heart disease. And that is of a fat limit of being 20% of daily calorie consumption, which is double the amount which is recommended for the reversal diet. So preventive diets would not require such sweeping changes, although the changes would still be significant and quite different from probably what we're used to eating. So he set an upper limit of 20% of total calories coming from fats and oils for prevention, because above that level, there is the risk of cardiovascular disease worsening. So he also describes in his book something which was really amazing regarding the causation of heart disease and also how cholesterol levels are strong predictors.
Okay.
So he recommended if you have heart disease, he recommended keeping your cholesterol level below 150 milligrams per deciliter or 3.88 millimoles per liter. And that's actually lower than the recommended levels for prevention, which is, as we said before, is it's below a total of 5 for total cholesterol, or 193 in the American system, and for LDL below 3 or 116 in the American system. But he's talking about people who actually have heart disease.
Okay.
So he's recommending an even lower level of 3.88 millimoles per liter or 150 milligrams per deciliter for those people.
Okay.
So some of the best epidemiological evidence linking heart disease with cholesterol comes from what's called the Framingham Heart Study.
Yeah, we actually studied the Framingham Heart Study. So for anyone who doesn't know, Framingham in Massachusetts, it's like a moderate-sized town near Boston. And in 1948, scientists began studying half of the town's 10,000 residents to determine the risk factors of coronary heart disease.
Yeah, that's right. And those people were checked and examined every 2 years after that start in 1948. So I'm going to quote directly from Dr. Ornish.
Okay.
In his book, with regard to the Framingham Heart Study, he said, the doctors there said, let's measure everything that might be related to heart disease. We'll keep track of who gets a heart attack during the next several decades and see if there's any correlation between these factors and the risk of heart disease. So during the next 40 years, the Framingham Heart Study gave us the most conclusive evidence showing that high blood pressure, cholesterol, smoking, obesity, and diabetes increase the risk of developing coronary heart disease. And they found in the study that for every 1% that the blood cholesterol level rises above 150 milligrams per deciliter or 3.88 millimoles per liter, the chance of developing coronary heart disease increases by about 2%. Dr. William Castelli is the medical director of the Framingham Heart Study.
Yeah.
According to him, one of the more interesting findings is that no one in the Framingham study has ever had a heart attack whose blood cholesterol was less than 150.
Wow.
So it kind of made them heart attack proof.
Wow, yeah.
And he goes on to say, for most adults, a blood cholesterol level this low is only achievable on a low-fat vegetarian diet. That is his reversal diet or option 4 in our diets.
So our diets have kind of changed significantly compared to the diets that would have been in the Framingham, like the diets that people would have eaten around the 1950s, let's say.
Yeah.
So
but if you go back even further, in 1900, in a typical diet, 2/3 of, in the US, this is 2/3 of the protein in a typical American diet came from plant-based food.
Really?
Whereas now, 2/3 of the protein comes from animal-derived food.
So we're so dependent on animal agriculture.
And it's increased greatly. In fact, since I was a child, the average consumption of meat has doubled. We're eating twice as much per person compared to when I was a child. So, as mentioned previously, cholesterol is only found in animal products, including dairy products. Animal products tend to be high in saturated fats, which are converted to cholesterol by our livers. The cholesterol in our bodies, and which is measured in our blood, comes from 2 sources. The main source, firstly, is cholesterol that's internally made by our bodies, and that constitutes about 3/4 of the cholesterol. But secondly, the cholesterol that we consume, of which all comes from animal sources, is 1/4 of the cholesterol in our bodies. So that we can't control the former, but we can control the latter, what we eat. And he also points out that the more cholesterol we consume, the greater risk we have of developing coronary heart disease.
It would make you want to stop eating meat.
Well, I mean, that was the change I made from after my heart episode. I
or at least cut down.
Yes, and cutting down is also very good, and everything makes a difference. And because, as we said before, it's been scientifically shown that the more you eat per day,
the more meat you eat,
the higher your chances of having a heart episode and also of having cancer.
So we talked about that before, didn't we?
The two are related. And he also described a study for men that were followed up for 25 years, and it showed that dietary cholesterol consumption was the greatest predictor for coronary artery disease.
Wow.
And also that cholesterol-rich foods promote heart disease, even in people with low cholesterol levels. He wrote that his reversal diet, or our option 4, contains almost no cholesterol.
Okay.
Well, in fact, in our one, it contains none. And he allowed a small amount of skim milk and some egg white for protein.
Okay.
So in his one contained less than 100 times of the average American diet consumes in their diet.
Okay.
So that and the figures were, if you remember, the typical American diet, the daily consumption of cholesterol was about 400 to 500 milligrams of cholesterol per day, whereas his reversal diet contained 5 milligrams of cholesterol. If you're on option 4, which is vegan 10%, there's no cholesterol you're taking in at all.
It makes me feel more comfortable, I think, if I was on that kind of diet, because it just sounds a bit scary to be taking in that much extra cholesterol.
And it's something you can easily have control over. And in his book, he also described another medical study showing that cholesterol levels were directly related to mortality from heart disease. So the other component of his diet, as it is in our diet, is a change to whole meal, a whole grain, a whole food. So this involves using food in its natural state without being processed, the kind of food that our ancestors ate. And also fresh fruit and vegetables are strongly encouraged, unprocessed, organic if possible, but it's not always possible for everyone.
Yeah, and it's just to chime in again, it's kind of similar to what I was saying earlier, but the way you feel, like if you think about how you feel after eating, like, what's it called? Plain pasta, like the pasta that's not whole grain.
Yeah.
And you feel a bit sluggish, you feel a bit like
Yeah.
rotten after eating a big bowl of that. Heavy.
Yeah.
But if you eat a bowl of whole grain pasta, you can feel better straight away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It actually makes a difference
It does.
into how you're feeling.
It does. So bread should be whole meal or whole grain. Actually, whole meal is better than whole grain.
Yeah.
Rice and pasta should be whole grain or brown, and without the husk being removed. The husks contain many very healthy micronutrients and phytochemicals, which you're losing if they got rid of.
Yeah.
And this makes the food full, as we've said before, of complex carbohydrates
Which
when
are
it's
the
whole
better
grain.
ones.
Yeah. And it's those are broken down slowly in the gut and therefore absorbed slowly into the bloodstream. Whereas with simple carbohydrates like white bread, sugar, cakes, candies, they're absorbed quickly from the gut and they rapidly enter the bloodstream, giving a sudden rise in your blood sugar called a sugar rush.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, when the sugar goes down again as quickly as it went up, that leaves an empty space and you have a craving for more food.
Yeah, like
So,
crash.
Yeah, you end up eating more and taking in more calories. And with whole foods, as we said, the blood sugar goes up very gradually. You don't get the sugar rush and you don't get the empty feeling and craving for more because your blood sugar goes down very slowly.
That's why I have porridge every morning, because porridge is a complex carbohydrate.
Yeah.
And I always feel so good after my porridge in the morning.
Yeah, and they say breakfast is one of the most important meal of the day because it keeps you going for a long time, especially if you're working or studying.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and you feel fuller and more content with what you've eaten.
So we've covered a lot today with, we talked about fats and fat levels and how to keep track of them. We talked about the Framingham Health study and how the results of that show us how cholesterol is so important.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how meat and processed foods, they contain a lot of cholesterol.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
will we do
The recipe of the week?
the recipe of the week?
Yes, yeah. We're going
Sorry,
to.
guys, I had a brain block there.
No, that's okay. I was going to talk about is many, and we can leave this for the next time.
Yeah.
But many people worry if they change their vegetarian diet, will they get enough protein, or if
Big question.
teenagers announce they want to go vegetarian and their parents freak out because they think they're not going to get enough protein for growth. But I can reassure you that the typical vegetarian diet contains more than enough protein and it's good for you. And just an anecdotal thing, I have an Indian friend who lives in Toronto. He's over 6 foot tall, and he told me the first time he ever ate meat, he was in his 20s. So being vegetarian certainly didn't retard his growth. And he returned to being vegetarian again recently, and he says that Indian vegetarian food is the most delicious and healthiest in the world.
Dal. Yeah, I love a dal.
Yeah. So we can go into how you get your protein in vegetarian food and how it's naturally there the next time.
In season 2, because
Yes.
we're going to take a break for a while. Yeah,
That's right.
This episode here today, guys, is the end of season 1, but we will see you very soon for season 2. So we're going to leave you with the last recipe of the week of season 1. So do you want to take it away, Charles?
Yes, after the break.
After the break.
Yeah.
We're seeing you in a minute, guys.
Okay, thanks. So this week is a dish that is traditionally regarded as an unhealthy dish, burger and French fries. But believe it or not, I'm going to tell you a way that you can cook it, create it in a healthy way, and you still have something you always loved, chips and burgers. but
we all love
that
chips
helps
and
the
crackers.
option, yeah.
Yeah.
So this dish serves 2 people, and I'll just go straight into the ingredients. So we want 2 large whole grain or wholemeal bread rolls, 2 vegan burgers. I mentioned before how I like the Beyond burgers.
Beyond burgers are great, yeah.
There's also, in Ireland, there's one called Glass Burger, which has a lower fat level.
Mm-hmm.
Next is, Linda McCartney also does a vegan burger as well, yeah. Then next we have lettuce pieces, the quantity to taste, 2 large sliced tomatoes, 1 large preserved gherkin. That's the kind that you buy in jars in Polish shops.
I'll be taking the gherkin out of mine.
Yeah, I love gherkins.
Gherkins.
Oh, you don't like it? Oh no, I like them very much. And again, I'm going heavy on the potatoes because they're healthy. 6 good quality potatoes, peeled and washed, and 2.5 mils of rapeseed or canola oil. Now, the last one is optional. It's 5 to 10 mils of tomato ketchup. Just be a bit careful there because it does contain sugar, but it's
have a little bit.
low on fat. Yeah, just to give it an extra bit of taste. You don't need to use a lot of it.
Yes.
So how do you do it? This is the method. First, wash and peel the potatoes and then slice them longitudinally into medium-sized chips. A grill is what I normally use to cook them. So the grill has a tray with rails or bars on it. And so if you take a 2.5 mil spoon, the Calpol spoon that we've spoken about previously, fill it with rapeseed or canola oil, and then using either a brush or your finger, rub it along the rails of the grill. So it just this is just purely to stop the chips sticking to it.
Okay.
Then lay the chips at right angles to the rails in rows along the grill in a single layer. So that much will probably cover your grill, and you put it into the top oven on your cooker. And cook it for 40 to 45 minutes at 200 degrees centigrade, or if you have a fan oven, 180 degrees centigrade. As I said, usually the small oven on a cooker can be used. They don't need to be turned, and you cook them until they're lightly browned. And then remove them from the grill using a plastic or a wooden fish slice and a wooden spoon. And as I said, the oil is simply to stop the chips sticking to the rails. And put a very small amount of salt on the chips. Again, one of the healthy things we're doing is to try and reduce the salt that we use. So while the chips are cooking, take the vegetable burgers and defrost them if necessary in a microwave. Normally each burger about a minute in a microwave will defrost it. If you only have one grill and it's occupied by the chips, the burgers can be cooked on a pan. Normally there's enough oil in them that if you turn them frequently, you don't need to add any oil to it. If there's space on the grill, you can cook them on the grill along with your chips. And they will cook in usually about 10 to 15 minutes, turning and until they're lightly browned on each side. Then open the 2 whole grain bread rolls, place a burger on each, and on top of each burger, put the lettuce and the sliced tomato. Then you garnish it, not in your case, but garnish it with some thinly sliced gherkin and a little tomato ketchup. And there you have it, a burger in a bun with chips, all made in the low-fat way.
Fantastic.
But there's more to this because recently I got an air fryer.
Oh, I love the air fryer.
And I find they're very good for cooking in a low-fat way. So
They are.
yeah, I'll tell you how to make a very similar dish with the air fryer. What you need to do if you have an air fryer with 2 containers in it, you put in I think it's easier rather than make chips, make them into kind of the size of potato wedges, small little squares. Put them in one compartment of your air fryer, Sprinkle on the same amount of rapeseed or canola oil, 2.5 mils, just sprinkle them on top.
Yeah.
You can add little herbs for taste as well, some oregano or some mixed Italian herbs. And if you cook that, if you have 6 potatoes, you'll probably need to cook it at 200 degrees with the air fryer for 30 minutes for 6. And then on the other side, put your 2 vegan burgers from frozen, and if you cook them for about 9 or 10 minutes, that will be enough. And with the air fryers, you can usually synchronize them so they both are ready at the same time. And then you put the burgers in the buns in the same way we described. So that's another way of making a very similar dish in a low-fat way.
Do you think the Italians called mixed Italian herbs? Do they just call them mixed herbs?
Probably. I never thought of that.
I'll have to ask. I have an Italian friend. I'll ask him.
Yeah, I never know quite what herbs are good to put on potatoes, but I just tried mixed Italian ones and they seem to work.
They're pretty good. So that sounds great. I'll definitely have to try that at some stage. I have so many recipes to try from this podcast, guys. I don't know how I'm going to keep up.
Going to put them all of our recipes. We've started putting them up, but we're going to put them all up on our social media.
So Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Your Heart, Our Planet.
Yeah.
And so we're going to take a little break before we start season 2. We're probably we'll be back at the end of April.
Yeah.
So it's a break for about a month and a half or 2 months nearly. And in season 2, we're going to talk more about the environment, about climate change. So, yeah, we're going to alternate the episodes. One week we'll be talking more about diets, and the alternate weeks we're going to be talking about climate change is starting to go through.
So our planet is starting to come in.
Yes, that's right. Because we don't want to overdo it on the diet. We want to focus on both things. But we hope that you found what the advice we've been giving helpful. And as I say, if you want to find out more information, it's all in my book, Save Your Heart, Lose Weight and Help Save the Planet, which is available on Amazon as a paperback and Kindle. So we're going to miss you all, but we're looking forward to seeing you at the end of April. So it's bye from me.
And if you want to leave us any comments on this season of the podcast, just let us know. And hopefully we'll be reading your comments in season 2. So goodbye from me as well, guys. Bye now.
Bye.